Advanced AI is going to have the accidents of human consciousness, but not the substance. But you'll have enough people fooled thinking that it has some real substance of consciousness. And then, of course, AI will have rights, I guarantee you. Right? People will be protesting, no, it has rights, and you'll have all that from like the secular space. You'll have some worship of it, no doubt. Um, well,
Like the early philosophers and theologians before us, we are seeking to nourish our souls, discover the truth, and live in the world, but not of it. Welcome to the Magnus Podcast, where John Johnson and Larissa Bianco hope to connect contemporary thinkers to conversations from the catacombs in the classical Christian tradition before us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Magnus Podcast. John Johnson, joined by Drago Dimitrov today, a very special guest who I met in person, though I've been stalking him on Twitter and the socials for quite some time, X as they call it now. But I met Drago in Rome at the AI Builders Forum, or we were honored to be invited by Longbeard and the Vatican. And that was my first time inside the Vatican. How about yours, Drago?
It was, yeah, that was pretty surreal, like across the world trip. And I remember, I think we were at the St. Peter's Basilica. We were getting ready to go downstairs to the tomb of St. Peter for mass, and yeah, we were just standing next to each other, like, oh yeah, by the way, I follow you on X. I'm like, what? Really? He's like, yeah, but I have an anonymous account. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it wasn't anonymous enough, so I had to blow it up eventually to protect my day job. But anyway, I still lurk through the AMI Twitter account. But it was an amazing experience to have mass at St. Peter's tomb and
and
connect with other Catholics doing great things.
Absolutely. And that was my first time at the Vatican for sure. And yeah, what an experience, what a meeting of people. Yeah, smart people such as yourself. And then we just brainstorming the role of the church in shaping the course of this, change of epoch. I mean, hopefully we can make an influence to offset some of the secular tides. We at least have to try.
Let's talk about your background. You have a very interesting story, at least an interesting resume. How did you get into the life you're in? I've talked to you a little bit, and you're into technology. You've got an app that we'll talk about, and you've got a real solid philosophical background, it seems. So just tell us about your story.
Yep, absolutely. So, moved from Bulgaria when I was 5, went K through 12 Christian school. Bible class every day. We had a structured worldview education, which I loved. It shaped me. So you're already asking, like in seventh grade, eighth grade, like the fundamental questions of what does it mean to be a person? Who is God? How do I know things? Epistemology. And so I was already kind of in that process. And then when I, long story short, after, when I got into college, Notre Dame, these other things, I then wrestled for 5 years with becoming a Catholic. And I already had a robust worldview. I mean, I was someone who was it's not like I didn't know what I believed. I was very clear, had all the arguments. But then, like one piece at a time, challenged, reframed, and changed my worldview as an adult. Which I feel like is less typical because a lot of times people inherit a culture and then they determine their worldview once. But anyway, I had to flip that. So I had from the small town graduating class of 14 kids going to New York City where you're like plugging into the matrix and no one cares who you are, you're nothing, right? So the small town to big town paradigm. And so yeah, that influenced me. I did the Wall Street thing as an investor, buy side, hedge funds, high yield bonds, etc. There's aspects of that I didn't find fulfilling, which we could always get into. And then I went to Chicago Booth for business school, pivoted to tech, VC, startups, and did built some software for different startups, consulting. And long story short, I was always praying, like I wanted to be a pastor when I was a Protestant. So I always had this itch of like ministry, but then I had these other skills and professional things that developed. So I'm like, God, can you please give me a way to align these skills that you've had me build and also just like do things for the church, like give me a ministry type of thing. So yeah, I
And
mean,
you had a sort of a great books background then. You had an introduction to philosophy, or at least epistemological questions through
yeah.
elementary school, essentially.
Yeah. Through my school and then at Notre Dame, they required everyone to take two theology classes, two philosophy classes. So yeah, and then chess was a big thing too. So I can solve. I mean, I don't know how to say this without sounding like, arrogant. So I really want to say
Oh no,
humility,
go for it.
but any chess position you give me, I can solve. My puzzle rating is like over 3,000 elo, and because I have a very
Whoa.
step-by-step, yeah, very step-by-step system, so I was obsessed, ruthlessly obsessed with like thinking in general, and then that also led to like, I mean, you could call this glorified ADD. You could call this a single parent household without a father. So I'm just trying to figure things out. But, that's why I engaged in athletics, arts, intellectual stuff because I was so obsessed with like, let me minimize my blind spots in life. I don't want to get burned. And if I understand how the artist thinks, how the athlete thinks, how the intellectual thinks, then maybe I'll see enough sides of this thing called life and I'll just have a good mental model. So, yeah, the chess was a big thing for sure as far as thinking.
That's amazing. And let's just double click on this here because it does sound like you're a genius. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a 3,000 is nothing to shake a stick at. But you had an early formation or at least exposure to the liberal arts. And I want people to really understand
Yeah.
that we've said this so many times on this show, but with this sort of education, you can do anything you want. We get a bad rap in the liberal arts world as like, oh, you studied great books at Thomas Aquinas College. What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? It sounds useless, and it is useless. But the real answer to what are you going to do with that is anything I want. And I love highlighting examples of this because you took that sort of formation and you did. You went to Wall Street and you went to Notre Dame, and now you're in the tech world and now you're a thought leader, being invited to the Vatican to discuss the church's response to the emergence of AI. And these aren't really skills that you could learn as well in a trade school format. You need a mind that's prepared to be receptive to all that is, a disposition of wonder, right? That's
This
where you
position of
started.
wonder, yeah. Which is interesting, not to hedge that too much, because yes, it's the wonder, it's the curiosity. But now, like, and I'm 32 now, in my current phase, it's been more of like reining the curiosity in and focusing it in. Almost, because there is the vice of excessive attachment to curiosity, which that's a person. But to your point, not a lot of people aren't even curious enough, and they don't embrace that wonder. They just kind of silo into one type of thinking. So I do agree with what you're saying, while also contrasting that currently I've had to limit what I'm curious about and keep it very mission focused.
How would you distinguish between wonder and curiosity, especially curiositas the vice? There's definitely a big difference. One's usually good and one's usually not.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. So I haven't thought about this, but just to riff even because it is interesting. When I hear wonder, I certainly think about it's adjacent to beauty in the sense of you're encountering something that's greater than you. You're at the cliffs, you're in front of the mountain. So there's a wonder and you're seeing something that has intrinsic goodness that is worthwhile. So there's an implicit ordering towards like a higher good, perhaps. But curiosity could be like, here's the hierarchy of goods, and my curiosity can lead me looking at these like lower level goods that aren't really that thing as opposed to that upward pull and orientation to what matters most. So I don't know. I haven't looked at that. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but to me, just intuitively, that's how it hits when you say that.
So, are you familiar with the story of the centurion's faith in Luke? It's actually in Matthew also.
Yeah, was this with the child of the centurion who needed to be
Yeah,
healed?
yeah. So he's got the paralyzed servant,
A servant. Okay.
and yeah, right. It's right after Jesus heals the child, but then the centurion comes up to him and says, "Hey, come heal my servant." And Jesus responds, "I'll go heal him." And the centurion stops him and says, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof.
Yeah.
Say the word, and my servant will be healed. Definitely, that's in a pretty important part of the liturgy too, right?
Yes.
But then he says, "For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one go, and he goes. That one come, and he comes. And say to my servant, do this, and he does it." And then Jesus marvels at the centurion's words. And he says, "Truly, I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith."
Hmm.
But here's what's crazy about that is that, I don't know what the Greek is, but the Latin is definitely admiratio,
Okay.
that Jesus wonders upon this man's faith, which is
Mm.
a strange thing to do for a divine person who knows everything.
Yeah.
That he has wonder upon this man's faith, which is it's sort of humbling and edifying to know that our faith causes God to admire or wonder upon us. Like, wow, it's kind of, there has to be an element of surprise and wonder, at least as we think of it as humans.
Yeah.
But for Jesus to wonder, it's definitely not a curiosity. It's more of a marvel. And in his case, it's probably a marvel at something that he has made through his work, right? He's the creator.
Mm.
But wonder is, I always like to say that wonder is sort of opposed to this thing that we praise in our modern dialect, but that's critical thinking. We sort of laud critical thinking. We should be critical thinkers also. I don't really like critical thinking because I'm not really fit to be a critic of reality. I'd rather wonder upon it and its creator,
Mm.
right? And I don't,
Love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
maybe I'm splitting hairs,
No,
but wonder's always good.
very interesting. Okay, so this is how I would connect that to something that's been on my mind is let's see if we could take this into kind of like the atheistic methodology versus non or even Protestantism. Sorry for any Protestant listeners, but the reductive mindset of chopping, chopping, chopping as opposed to the opposite, right? Because even then that critical thinking, you're reducing in some sense, you're critiquing, and wonder is you're expanding and you're sucking in or you're sponging. So like what I like to say with atheists is would you rather make the mistake of hallucinating something that's not there, or would you rather make the mistake of being blind to something that was? Because that's the type of mistake you're not going to be able to guarantee you get it right. So either you're going to accept these things, God and all that, and maybe it wasn't real, right? You're hallucinating, or you'd be blind because you're so focused on reducing. And so even like when Alex O'Connor had a conversation with Bishop Barron, and Bishop Barron really tried to make the beauty argument, oh, you see this Shakespeare thing and this drama, and don't you know there's so much more? And from a reductionist mindset, you have to say, oh, like, I love this thing because it's an ancestral survival strategy that then created chemical reactions in me and so on and so forth. And you're reducing, you're trying to stuff something down into a box, into a container. And anyway, so this energy of reductive versus the opposite, and even with Protestants and Catholics, I would say Protestants have a very reductive approach to the Christian faith where you have to cram it into this box of proof texting based on predefined principles of exegesis and scripture, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, when I hear you talk about this wonder versus the opposite, the wonder does feel like it's this unity of the intellect and the heart, because the heart tastes the truth, or our interior faculties taste the truth. And wonder involves that, and that kind of connects to, and I'll land it there. The with Antiqua et Nova, right? What is real intelligence, and what is with the human beings, right? It's not just the execution of like propositions or cognitive tasks, but it is this full embodied use of your being to truly, yeah, taste and comprehend these truths in a very direct level that is beyond just it is underneath words themselves.
Yes, and therein lies a poignant difference between the way humans think and the way computers, quote unquote, think, right? Humans don't think in binary. There's also a poignant difference between Catholics and Protestants. But they have a problem with symbolism. That is, they have a problem with things pointing to other things.
Pointing,
So,
yeah.
like the poet William
Mm,
Blake's, if you read his poem, like to see heaven in a grain of sand or something. I don't remember it exactly, but that's just it. You can take a grain of sand and through that one little thing have the entire universe in all of its transcendent splendor opened up to you. Now, it's a mean condition, right? Because you can let that grain of sand point to everything that is, and so bask in its wonder that it's reflecting. Or you could idolize it, right? You could start worshiping the grain of sand, which
Mm.
is not wise. But computers definitely can't do that. Humans don't think in binary, right? One thing can mean everything. In fact,
Mm.
anything can point to everything. Is that fair to say?
No, that's beautifully said. Yeah, everything is a network of associated ideas and concepts. So anything in front of you is intrinsically in relation to the other thing. So, like you said, the grain of sand, it's not just the grain of sand, but it has these threads. And if you actually see where the threads point, all of a sudden, and then you're seeing everything when you're only seeing the something. And yeah, that's very interesting. It's because that is the reductive thing is to look at the object without the threads. And anytime you want to look at the threads and say, no, no, no. Protestants will say, eisegesis, you're reading into it. I'm not going to eisegesis. That's the fear of hallucinating, right? You try to
Mm.
show them how Mary is all over the scripture typologically and otherwise, and they say, you're reading into it. It's like, no, no, no. There's things that are pointing. So yeah, not being disconnected from teleology, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's an exercise. I have the honor of teaching my kids co-op. I call it theology class, but it's kind of just an intro to thinking, So I get to show up every other week and teach kids catechesis and get them asking great questions. It's a ton of fun. But one of the first things I do is I'll ask them to just name a thing, right? Anything they want.
Yeah.
And a kid will say a race car. And I'll say, okay. And I pull out like a $5 bill or something. I say, I'll give $5. Anybody can tell me it has nothing to do with race car, and they start naming all these other things and one by one, and the kid's like, the other kid goes, a banana peel, and I'm like, well, can a banana peel fall on a race car track like in Mario Kart and make that car slide off,
Boom.
right? And another kid goes, outer space, and I said, well, can't you shoot a race car into outer space? And they go on and on and on,
Yeah.
right? And it turns out, moral of the story, you can't name anything that doesn't somehow connect to race car. But
Mm,
but what is the common denominator? At the end of the day, if it exists, it shares an existence. If race car exists and banana peel exists
mm,
and outer
mm.
space exists, then they're united by this transcendent thing, the highest transcendental, which is existence.
Right.
And surprise, surprise, they find out a few months later in class that existence has a name. He's identifying himself in
Mm,
scripture as I am, right? Moses says, who should I say sent me? And the burning bush says, tell him I am sent you.
yeah.
And you think, well, I am what? Finish the sentence. But that's just it, that we're sort of united. We are united in being.
Yeah.
Paul says as much, right? In him we live and breathe and have our being. And it's so easy to get caught up in this binary thinking of a race car is not a banana. End of discussion, right? In other words, nothing points to anything else. That's a horrific intellectual position to take, and that's kind of results in us thinking like beasts or machines, which is exactly how I think AI is being can't but be programmed to process, right? Because it's got to be binary, just ones and zeros.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and even I'm even thinking, right, this proposition, which should be self-evident, right? Existence as the shared trait. Even in, I love these questions, right, that you said. So, how do you connect the race car to the banana? And then it's like, well, yeah, well, how about Mario Kart? And then, it goes on the racetrack. So then to access that idea, then it's like, well, which faculties are we using? Well, sure, I'm maybe using memory to fetch, if we, with the cogitative power, right? If we're gonna get all Aquinas, of my Mario Kart experience, okay, and I'm using maybe imagination to project and create new things. So someone who's skeptical will be like, well, you're just like, yeah, like I can connect a race car to a unicorn spaghetti monster thing. Well, if we say that's a real thing, but the whole point that I even can in theory connect things that are seemingly so disconnected. The fact I have that ability of consciousness itself points the existence of that faculty itself points to the underlying reality that we're trying to illuminate. Um, Yeah. So yeah, no,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
that's right. Or even if you can speak these things, then they share that, right? They share a certain abstract existence in your mind, even if you can't
Yeah.
find a flying spaghetti monster in nature, right?
Yes. 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 Right.
Yeah.
Um, no, pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah. So, tell me about your project on habits. I'm intrigued by this. Usually I see, you say you're making Catholic spiritual direction at scale.
Yeah.
Now, the Luddite pessimist in me tends to see something like that and say, stop, I'm not going to spiritual direction on a Zoom meeting or an app or whatever.
Yeah.
And, but then I know you and I think, well, this isn't some hokey, lightning in a bottle. It's an app and it's Catholic, so buy it. It actually sounds like a very intriguing thing. So just tell us what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a couple of interesting related threads. So might have to go the side way and then we hit it down the middle, right?
Do the
So
weave.
do the weave. We'll do the Trump weave. So a few years ago, we have this company called Seek Direction, and actually, it's active and it's part of what we're doing in Holy Habits. But it's a spiritual director matchmaking platform. So if you are struggling to find a spiritual director, your pastor's too busy, like where do I find a director? You can go on here, and we there's an algorithm where we match you. So you say, well, I want my director to be, good with scripture. I want him to have a sense of humor, knows the catechism, whatever, right? So we do a matchmaking and you get direction. So we had like 300 directors, over 3,000 directees, no marketing spent. So clear, like people are hungry for this stuff, and but there's a supply and demand gap. So anyone who's looked at this space, it's like a lot of people want direction, but there's a low supply. But then also some people they think they want direction, but they're not actually ready for like the full thing. Some people just need a basic orientation to holiness to build a solid repertoire of good habits, building virtue and practices before, going into all-in spiritual direction. And so, and we did this in partnership with Dan Burke. Dan Burke, he's written on spiritual direction. He actually runs spiritualdirection.com, the Avila Institute, former president of EWTN. So, and we had that, and then there's the need for like, well, there's an app that could help this habit building, but we can do this in a very different way that hasn't been done before. And so, um, while we leave that thread, the other thing I'd say is like, okay, we know we're supposed to become saints. So John, Saint John, Drago, Saint Drago, but it's a little ambiguous. Like, what does that roadmap actually look like? Can we get clarity? Because, Mother Teresa's path was different than Saint Teresa of Avila's path, different than Saint John Paul. There's these different ways where, on the one hand, there are underlying principles like in moral theology, and I could talk about some of those, where there is a standard template in some sense. And then on the other hand, it's personalized, right? So how do you help the individual see what their personalized spiritual journey might look like the very next thing they need to do to become a saint, while also leveraging the time-tested principles of the church and all the treasures and the wisdom of the saints. So anyway, the reason why I'm not a saint yet isn't because of deficiency of God's grace. God is there. It's my cooperation with his grace. And so we can use tools and technology to aid us, through behavioral science and all these things, to do that. I mean, just like the secular spaces have like addiction apps to overcome alcoholism, drugs, etc., right? There's ways where we can more holistically overcome the battle with habitual mortal sin, building habits of prayer, etc. And again, we could talk about the three stages of ascent, from like, where you are to becoming a saint. But anyway, uh, well, there's a couple things that you could always interrupt me, but just two more things. One, we have when you start with the app, you do a root sin assessment. So you based on the triple concupiscence of 1 John 2:16. There's pride, vanity, sensuality, pride of life, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh. You see your root sin. You put context in your life situation. I'm a father, I'm a business person. Here's what I'm struggling with. And then using AI, using wisdom of the saints, the church, we prescribe habits. Like the app will actually tell you, hey, like try doing this. And so that's just one of that was the flagship thing that we did. We do a lot more now. But anyway, zooming out, yes, AI cannot replace spiritual direction. But there's a spectrum between like do it yourself holiness, where it's just me and I'm reading some books and I'm praying, and then like, yeah, full on accompaniment with the director. And then there's this whole middle space of like low touch accompaniment. And we even have a spiritual director interface where you could, send weekly check-ins. And so there's a whole spectrum that is not served in the market now to bring people from that. And so our intent is to ramp people up, and ultimately we want to offload them to a spiritual director, but not everybody's ready. And so it's basically a sanctification, spiritual growth platform for serious Catholics who, maybe some Catholics were going off the cliff, and fine, now they're the cliff's behind them, but then just because the cliff is behind you doesn't mean you're going to get to the destination. You still have to make a lot of decisions going forward to get to where you need to get to. So that's our that's
I
like,
I
yeah,
think I approve of this, and I'm really happy to hear you work with Dan Burt. Dan's a really good man. I've
yeah.
previously supported him quite a bit, and I used to be the associate director of the Avila Institute.
Oh, wow, small world. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
So that's amazing. I want to ask you questions about what spiritual direction is, because I think for many a lay Catholic, it's kind of a foreign thing, or maybe only for saints. And there are many different, very well-founded opinions that take different positions on this. But let's kind of do a lightning round here.
Yeah.
Do you think spiritual direction can be done by lay people?
Huh, that's a great question. I'd have to say yes, because there's the certified institutes and we have lay directors. But yeah, I think the ultimate function of a director is to help you discern and listen to the Holy Spirit in your life. So which is through encouraging you to access Christ directly. So a lay person could, in theory, but I suppose, right, getting into the authority question, there are certain things that priests, of course, can do that lay people can't. And then what part of spiritual direction could there be a slice of that is exclusively for the religious? I'd have to think about that, but basic accompaniment, you know, discernment of spirits, yeah, I think I don't have an
Let,
immediate
let
objection.
me ask a different question. In your
Yeah.
mind, what is the distinction, if any, between spiritual direction proper and just good Catholic mentorship or Catholic life coaching or even Catholic friendship?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think right the thing is like the spiritual direction can sometimes, you know, present itself like there might be therapeutic elements, there might be coaching elements, but it's always in some sense distinct, and people in direction like to really emphasize that. Because it's like a spiritual fatherhood to help you see yourself as Christ sees you, to have, affirmation, like to receive the gaze of Christ in a sacramental, tangible way. And so as a coach, for example, yes, like your presence as a Catholic coach might give someone the experience of Christ and can point them, but it's a little different. Coaching maybe is more goal oriented to specific obstacles you're trying to overcome, where spiritual direction is a more holistic accompaniment journey of let's get you in touch with the Holy Spirit, and what does the Holy Spirit want to do for you today? It's not about here's my goals, help me do my goals. It's like how do I listen to God better? And the spiritual director helps you do that.
Do you think, would you distinguish, well, would you say that I take it you would say every Catholic should have a spiritual director?
I would have said that, but now I say no, because if you're, for example, if you're not going to mass every week, right? If
Sure,
there's
sure.
certain, right, there's certain habits like you just need to get in a routine of good habits. And yes, a director, and let me even some directors actually say, I want you to have a therapist and see me as a director. So that's kind of been an
Okay.
interesting thing I've seen. And so in that sense, the reason why some people fall into sin habitually is maybe there's unresolved trauma and wounds and scars. And so that those things have to be dealt with. Um, but yeah, direction, I think, yeah, I don't think everyone necessarily needs to. I think everyone needs to be serious about holiness, and spiritual direction is an inevitable part of that. But if you're like a baby child new to the faith, you don't need a spiritual director right away. Like, that there's other things that you could do before you're ready and prepared for the discipline that spiritual direction entails.
Are you of the school of thought that the spiritual director and the confessor should be different humans? Could
I
they
don't,
be the same human?
I don't have I don't have a strong opinion on that.
Yeah.
I personally don't have an issue either way, because I've had religious directors and lay, so I don't that I've confessed. So it's nice. It's nice when you can confess with your director, I will say, but yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on that personally.
Yeah, I don't know if I do either. It's an interesting question though, and there are different priests. I think how do I put this nicely? There are more charismatic, more pious Catholic circles. I won't name them, but they treat spiritual direction like boyfriend girlfriend, not in any sort of romantic sense, but like, will you be my spiritual director? Right?
Mm,
Where there's a lot of priests who will just say, hey, you need to talk, get some time on my calendar, show up to my office, let's talk, sort of ad hoc, case by case basis, right? And I'm wondering how important that relationship is. Like, does there need to
mm.
be a person who's the director, or should a well-informed Catholic with a well-informed conscience sort of be free to just go get spiritual direction from a trusted priest or even mentor if that's on the table? Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of this does become linguistic and kind of even like trying to shape the words people use. So for sure, I mean, I've talked with one, my local pastor parish, and he's like too busy for spiritual direction. He just does spiritual direction with a handful of people in very exceptional circumstances. But he does a lot of pastoral counseling, right? Does a lot of
right.
these. So then it's like, well, where do you draw the line between pastoral counseling and like acute situations that require you, because there's the acute crisis, like, man, my marriage, man, my family, my work, that like I need a patch, versus like when things are steady, there's still a journey and progression, and those are, there's different needs and urgency there. So yeah, I mean, there's the more intimate you get, there is benefit, I suppose, like if someone can truly see the deeper layers of your heart over time in relationship with you, there is advantage in continuity. But at the same time, like not every use case needs that continuity. And sometimes, like, yeah, like it's like I can see any priest or pastor. I don't have to see the same one, depending on the situation. So yeah, it is something to untangle.
Yeah, and I think self-awareness is so important, especially for a Catholic who's just getting into, like you mentioned earlier, these sort of three levels, and I don't think you named them, but the purgative,
Yep.
the illuminative, and the unitive. And it's so hard to know where you are, and it's so hard to figure out that the point isn't really to know where you are. Like, it's not like a stripe on your taekwondo belt or something like that. Like, oh yeah, yeah, I transitioned from purgative to illuminative last Thursday, celebrating with the boys tonight,
Yeah.
uh, excuse me. It's not that. Um, but how should Catholics who maybe to whom this is a new concept start to think about the unitive way and the progression to sanctity, right? In the Carmelite sense.
Yeah, right. So stage one is the purgative way. It's the main struggle, right? Because each stage is identified by a certain thing. Is it's the wrestling against the flesh, right? It's the falling into mortal sin, taming the appetites, and so it's a real struggle, and there involves active purification of the senses. So it could be even intentional penance. Obviously, like with Lent, that's like a form. You're trying to free yourself of the disordered attachments to sin that are kind of clouding our vision. And then of course there's like within that the passive purification where sometimes like a suffering that happens to you, like you have a family sickness, you have unfortunate circumstance, you can use that also as a way to help sanctify you if you prayerfully unite it with Christ and his sacrifice. But then in addition to that, then it's like building the habits of virtue and the offsetting virtues against the vices. And, then when it's like there's the big rocks of mortal sin, then there's like the little rocks of venial sin, which are still really important. And then there's like the imperfections. And so it's kind of progressively, you get rid of the big rocks, go after the small rocks, etc. Sometimes in parallel, while also, building as they say, the infused contemplation of the mysteries of Christ, and really knowing Christ more intimately in the friendship with Christ through prayer and the sacraments, such that we then have, I mean, by the time you get to like a unitive experience where you're really, I mean, that's borderline beatific vision, right? It's like you're fully uniting with Christ, et cetera. So, I mean, I look like 95, 99%. It's like most Catholics are going to be in the purgative stage. And arguably today, more than any age of the church, you have more people in mortal sin than ever because there's so much distraction and temptation. So, in that sense, right, even though things are pretty easy breezy, materially speaking, spiritually, you could argue, well, one could argue that the habitual mortal sin issue is worse than it's ever been. So
That's
that's
pretty scary. I mean, it's true that, in this day and age, if you are average middle class paycheck, you're living like a king of old.
yeah,
And there is a level of luxuria that would be hard to have experienced any other time in history.
yeah,
Like if you own a dishwasher, that's pretty exciting.
yeah,
But luxuria, that is the word for lust in Latin, right? And so,
mm,
and not just in a sexual sense, but just an
yeah,
attachment to an inordinate attachment or fixation on things that aren't the whole, like parts at the expense of the whole. And
yeah.
so I think it's true that, have you ever read about the old, the stylites? You know what the stylites were?
The stylites. No, I
There,
haven't.
there were these early monks, like predecessors to the Benedictines and the Desert Fathers, basically. But they would go out and put themselves on pillars in the desert and just stay there for years at a time. And people would, bring them a basket of food from time to time if they were lucky. But
Wow.
there's one, I can't remember if it's Anthony of the Desert. One of them, anyway, in his account, somebody asks him, they're like, wow, it's amazing. You must have such great faith. And he says something like, the virtue required for what I'm doing is nothing compared to the virtue required to simply keep the faith and believe in the end days. Like the people, like our time, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he's kind of prophesying in the future that like those people just keeping the faith will be orders of magnitude more heroic and difficult than it is for me to stand up and pray all day on a pillar in the middle of the desert for years at a time, right?
Mm, yeah.
Which I find pretty, in one sense, edifying because it's like, wow, yeah, I guess I am a hero for believing. But that's probably not the right takeaway. Um, but
Yeah.
I do wonder how easy it is to be in mortal sin and how hard it is to be in a state of grace. And I think, especially for somebody who struggles with scrupulosity, it can be very unhelpful to, wonder if, every time you fart in the wrong direction that you need to go to confession, right? Or every time you have a sort of inclination toward one thing, or, you glance on one thing that you shouldn't be looking at on the internet or something like that, you know, you could make the argument that mortal sin is harder to fall into because precisely because it's not something you really fall, like you trip and fall, like, oh shoot, it's like it requires.
Intentional act of the will kind of thing.
That's right, it requires deliberation, it requires an act of the will. That said, any sin against the sixth is grave matter, right? So that check mark is there according to Aquinas. But I do think it can be tricky, and there's probably many in especially traditionalist Catholic circles who find themselves.
Mm,
I got to be really careful when I say this, but going to confession too much, out of scrupulosity, which is ultimately out of pride, right? Because you're thinking like, okay, great, thanks God, I'm good now, I am perfect, thank you, don't need you anymore, right? And then as soon as one thing happens, or one movement of the will in the wrong direction, and you're like, how could I have done that? I, me, right?
yeah.
And that's just the wrong. It's the wrong way to look at it, because the default should, is that, yeah, you're a slob, you're a
Mm,
mess, and it's only God's grace that keeps you better. But as soon as you start really thinking about your soul with your clipboard in hand at every turn, it can be pretty dangerous, just as dangerous, if not more, than a total lackadaisical approach to the spiritual life and a total lack of strictness on your conscience, right? It's like, I don't even know which one's worse.
Well, man, okay, there's some great threads there, or points you're saying here.
Pull on your favorite.
Oh man, I want to hit them all, man. I'm greedy that way, man. With the, um, well, first of all, yeah, which one's worse? I do think I'd have to look at with the Saints, but there's I'm gonna say, yeah, scrupulosity is always a risk, and certainly we don't want to become like Martin Luther, who was going to confession 10 times a day, and then
Great example. Great example.
led to the destruction of society. Thank you, Martin Luther, for everything post Enlightenment. But I think our culture broadly, I guess, yeah, we have to be specific because maybe in certain tradition circles the balance tips the other way. But our culture is not diligent enough. I think people are so obsessed with like, well, I'm gonna have my little watch that tracks my sleep cycles and my heart rates, how many steps that I do, my calories. But when it comes to like spiritual tracking, like, am I actually making progress, or am I literally struggling with the same thing I've been struggling 10 years ago? I don't think we're tight enough on that. Now, again, I want to be careful because sure, some people, it is a scrupulosity. So this is why you always have to like have the caveat. It's not true for all sizes and shapes, but on the average, I think we need to be more diligent. Um, then it's like, well, like for example, right? Like, sure. I mean, like, let's say the Sixth Commandment violations, porn. That's probably the most common thing. It's like, in my opinion, like the only way to overcome that, like, and this is just like a personal thing, but I'm pretty. It's like you can't even watch movies. You need to pre-screen the movies. Go on IMDb. You have to look at, what's the content in the movie. Because I know for me, like if I were to see a movie with a certain scene, the adversary will throw that scene in my consciousness for like the next week, maybe. Who knows? So I refuse. I've long given up, for example, even like stepping away because there's such an assault on this. And that's just one example, obviously. Then it's like there's so many other sins. That's the other problem is like, even like with the Sixth Commandment violations, like, dude, that's like, I know I don't want to overly focus on that because there's so much of a to holiness than just that. But I feel like in particular, if we're gonna talk with like the men, that's such a like thing. Like once you're done with that obstacle, there's like the next level, there's like pride. Like apparently I'm actually quite a jerk, right? Like, but I couldn't really see how much of a jerk I am because I was so busy with the lust stuff, right? It's like there's so many layers and things that Christ wants to show us of how to become, in theosis, right? Like him. And the only thing I will slightly, I know that's not what you meant, and it is that it's always God's grace. But I also want to be careful, not that we're like, as Catholics, we're never what is it, anti-monial, nomial, whatever it is, where it's like, who cares about the rules and the commandments because God's grace and whatever. Obviously, we're not like that. But
Definitely.
I know that's not what you're saying. But I do have a strong conviction in the instrumentality where, and I know it's a paradox of free will and sovereignty, but it's like who painted the Mona Lisa? Was it Leonardo da Vinci or was it brushes? The brushes. Well, it's like depending on the sense, well, both. Yeah, it was the artist, but the brushes also the print. So we are the brushes, like, but we get to choose to be the brushes and participate in the beautiful stuff. And so in that sense, dang right, like if I'm cooperating with grace, like what a beautiful merit. And it's God's grace, all the glory to him, but I get to be the instrument. And there's real dignity of that. It's not that I perpetually have to say, yeah, I'm a sloppy, no good, nothing. Like, no, like I can take dignity in acknowledging the work of Christ in me. It's not for my pride, it's not for my glory, but it's just a rejoicing of being a partaker of the divine nature. And that's a real thing, right? That's a thing that's attainable for people. Like it's a real tasting, as opposed to the adversary who'll say, no matter how much progress you make, you're always just going to be like a bumbling whatever. And, I don't know, like I think that hero's journey has been stripped. That's really what it is. Like we know how central the meme of a hero's journey is, and that's what we're all called to do. Of course, through the crucifixion of Christ, baptized, we've walked through the Red Sea. Now we're bumbling in the wilderness on our way to the promised land. And there's a real hero's journey. We're gonna have to do some conquest. We're gonna have to go after Jericho. We're gonna have to, destroy the Canaanites in our lives, right? In our soul. But there's a real hero's journey to participate. And when the walls fall down of Jericho, yeah, that was God's action, but I had to blow the trumpets. Now, obviously, my trumpets don't have a direct causation of knocking the walls down, but I still got to do it. I'm still participating and sharing in this thing. So anyway, I want to restore the real experience of the hero's journey in the spiritual life for people, because I think that's been robbed from them, and it's led to like a nihilistic resignation of do I even will I get to heaven? Will I don't know. It's like this kind of stuff.
Amen. And I love it. And I think there is something real to tap into. The market's definitely right. But yeah, I mean, I'm wearing this stupid Apple Watch here and it'll track my sleep and tell me how much deep sleep I got. Like, I think a tool to sort of like a digital journal effectively,
Yeah,
and
that's
a
right.
scoring, gamified, whatever. I think that's awesome. Like, I'll download it. I mean, this goes without saying, but I take it when somebody does the sin assessment, Drago's not on the other line, like watching
No.
what comes in. It's totally private and secure.
Yeah, private, secure, it's important. It's on, well, I don't want to say where we're storing the data centers, because I don't think you're gonna like the data center.
We'll talk about that.
Um, yeah, I mean, look, right. So that's, I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like, okay, could developers, like Indian developers that we have, if there needs to be troubleshooting, there could be ways with the encryption keys, whatever. But Drago's not. Don't worry, it doesn't have looking in. And worst case, if you're paranoid, which frankly, with any app like that, just use like a fake name. Then you really, right? You've crossed in case anything's an issue.
You should definitely patent the end-to-end seal of confessional encryption. That would be like, so, totally
Yeah,
market that. But no, that's great. That's
yeah,
great. And how does the app work? I'll download it. So I should have done
yeah,
it before.
sure.
But
Yeah,
is
sure.
it like a freemium sort of model? Do I pay you to tell you my sins and track my score? How does this work?
So we have a 14-day trial that you get access to the full features, 14 days. After that, if you want to keep using the 14 days, then you choose premium tier or you use the free tier. The free tier, you can still do accountability groups. So like, let's say you got a men's group of Bible study, you can assign the habits. Like, all right, guys, we're gonna do like Bible reading, or we're gonna do rosary, or even fitness. Like, doesn't really matter. You can set the goals, and then everyone gets the goals, and you have a leaderboard with your buddies. And here's a key differentiator: we have text messaging, logging, and reminders. So the best thing here is you don't have to open the app up. You get a daily text that says, "Hey, John, here's your 5 goals. Did you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?" Text to log, and bam, you log it. So we have that. But back to the main experience. So we have in the middle of the app, it's called the Holy Hub. It's a hub for holiness. And so we have these different tools and things you can use. There's the habit generator. There's daily gospel text messages. There's confession logging, such that if you use the journaling there, the app will then give you habits to kind of offset whatever it is you want to
That's
write
worth
down.
it just to remember when your last confession was. So next
Yeah,
time you go, you don't have to say, I can't remember.
I
It's
think it was a
been
couple
two
months.
months from my last confession. Okay, great. I'm in.
The Saintly Insights feature. So this is a little more exciting with the AI stuff. You choose a saint. So Saint Ignatius, Saint Teresa, Saint Francis, so whoever it is, you choose a saint. You submit a weekly reflection once a week. Answer 3 questions. Where did you see God in your life, working in your life this week? What kind of challenges did you run into? Struggles, temptations? What grace are you asking for? So you submit that reflection, and then we generate a saintly lesson, leveraging wisdom of the saint, of that spirituality, and it gives you a certain type of message. So like, for example, right? One of the things a couple weeks ago I wrote in my journal was, um, I noticed God's presence with just my son. He's 19 months old, running, dad, 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 like so excited. Just there was a day he just kept like going, and I'm like, wow. And I'm like, I felt God in that, right? And then the reflection that was generated for me said, well, think about just how you get that from your son. Imagine how God feels that wonder, right? In some sense, when you run to
Yeah.
him, and I'm like, bam,
That's
that's
right.
the nugget. I'm like, sweet, that is absolutely it. And then I took that to prayer. So
That's awesome. Are you familiar with the Ignatian principle of oppositum per diametrum?
it's not like a daily examine, is it?
No,
Positum.
no. You should totally. I've always thought that this would be actually something that you could apify pretty well, but it's been incredibly helpful for me personally. But
Okay.
so in your root sin examination or whatever, you're probably going to figure out a lot about yourself.
Yes.
But every virtue is a mean condition, right? Like Aristotle says, it's a middle
Right.
condition
Between the extra, right. Yep.
between the excess and the deficiency.
Yeah.
And Ignatius and certain good Jesuits, you always got to qualify good Jesuits, right?
Yeah.
But they came up with this idea and it's very Aristotelian, by the way. But the idea is you find out where you're erring. Maybe you're erring on the excess, maybe you're erring on the deficiency.
Yeah.
But if you're erring on the excess in all of your actions to get back to the middle, you don't just want to aim for the middle.
Yeah.
You want to actually aim for the other extreme. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
example, you find out that you are just a miser, right? You really struggle with the virtue of magnificence. You don't really know how to spend your money for the right causes.
Yeah.
And you're going to how you counter the vice of miserliness. Well, you're going to be a little bit more liberal with your spending. You're going to throw a great party, and it's all going to really hurt, right? You're going to give away a bunch of money to charity.
Yeah.
You're going to give an extra $20 to the bum on the street.
Yeah.
Like things that just don't come naturally to you at all. But the more you do those things on the opposite extreme from where your baseline is, the easier they'll get over time. And then you'll actually find yourself in the middle. But on the other extreme, say you find out in your examination that you struggle with lavishness, like you're a playboy, you're reckless with money, completely imprudent with it. Well, what's your recommendation going to be? It's going to be to shoot for the deficiency. So your advice would be like,
Yeah.
open a savings account,
Yeah.
uh, take some of your money out of equities and put it in bonds or something.
Yeah.
Right. Don't shop on Amazon all week. Right.
Yeah.
If you're into retail therapy. Right. So, but the practical advice is completely opposite depending on whether you fall in the excess or deficiency or lust, temperance, chastity, perfect example, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you're totally like prudish, like you won't show an ankle and you abhor the sight of the human body. Okay, how do you get to the perfect marital chastity? Whatever. Give your wife an extra foot massage one night or something.
Yeah.
Have an extra glass of wine. Relax a little bit, right? Whereas if you're totally lustful,
Yeah.
it's like cut off your internet access, right? Cut off your hand or whatever it is before it causes you to sin.
Right.
Okay. So, but something like that is like super easy, not easy, but it's possible to sort of apify that a recommendation through AI or even preset algorithm or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe 2.0 idea for you there. I won't charge you for the royalty there if you ever do that, but I would love something like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, what we have in V1, let's say, is like this leverage the offsetting virtue to overcome the vice. But to your point, this extra specificity of excess versus deficiency, I think, that's a worthwhile implementation. Look, I'll say so briefly. I'll talk about the root sins, and I'll tell you my root sin based on the app.
Wow, we're friends now. I guess so. Go for it.
Look, here's the thing, man. Like, if we're going to purgatory, and that's really gonna suck, it's the least of my concern is gonna be whether you know my stuff. Like, I couldn't care. Like, it'd be like a vanity thing, I guess, if I did. But
we're all gonna see it at the end of the day, right? It's like nothing will be hidden.
Yeah. So if you can help me like do the purgatory stuff now on Earth, my understanding is that's going to be much easier and preferable than like the purgatory experience post Earth. So so please chip away, give me the whatever suffering I need to have to cleanse me. But so okay, we have the disordered attachment to excellence, right? That's pride. We have the disordered attachment to reputation, how I am perceived, what people think about me, vanity. and we have the disordered attachment to the senses, to comforts, etc., sensuality. So you get that. And then there's a sub manifestations within each of those three buckets, right? Because pride, it could mean for one person, like, oh, I'm selfish. I think about myself all the time. It could be like I get easily angry and people don't do what I want. Or like in my case, when I did it, was like difficulty submitting to people who you perceive as less competent, whatever. So it's like maybe just like the boss, I know how to do this better, like type of thing, right?
Man, I struggle with that one for sure.
Right, yeah. And of course,
It's tough.
yeah. And then sensuality, it's like, well, okay, sure, it could be like a addictive type of thing, substances, whatever it is. Or it could be like procrastination, like I just like to be comfortable a lot. Or, I just lazy, like whatever, right? So there's different, we get into that layer of specificity. Now, in future iterations, I think it's nice to start with the easy three buckets because in spiritual direction, a lot of times that's what you'll do. But we'll probably end up doing the seven deadly sins thing, as like a more advanced thing. And then the 42 tributaries, like the sisters and cousins of the sins. Like there's some pretty cool stuff in the church. You can get pretty granular on this. To your
Yes.
point, right, with the excess deficiency spectrums and all that. That'd be cool. But for now, like, people are pretty thrilled. They're like, oh my gosh, I never thought about this root sin stuff. This is great. I like have an insight on myself and what I never knew because like we each have those three things, like pride, vanity, sensuality, but one of those is going to be a little more predominant. And then the more we're aware, the more I see like, oh, like that colored my interactions with those people. Oh, like that's affecting my perceptions. Like we got to be aware of the thing that we're fighting, right? We're engaged in spiritual warfare, and we, the more aware we are, not, always knowing God is merciful, right? The scrupulosity is of the devil. Anytime you feel despair, that's not of Christ. Christ is always peace. Peace is the spirit of Christ. So if any of these things cause you despair, it's clearly the devil messing. But God is a God of infinite mercy, and not only does He forgive us, but He empowers us to keep His commandments. That's the beautiful thing is we're trying to become 100% love. And yeah, maybe I'm 50%. On a good day, maybe I can hit 70% love. I don't know. You have to ask my wife and other people. But the whole point is, yeah, even if I fail at being 100% love God, love others, all my heart, soul, mind, I know that Christ will give me the power to get back up. It's like, so there's nothing to feel bad about. Like, uh, I don't know. It's like, yeah, it does. I do get sad to see someone discouraged, but like, I just can't. It's like, no, you can. You like, Christ can empower you. Like, you just gotta, I don't know.
How cardinal virtue centric is the app versus not versus these are not
Sure.
opposed things at all, but is it more like spiritual, mystic, inspiration, or like concrete Aristotelian virtues and theological virtues?
I use some of those in the algorithm. I used specific, and I haven't looked at it in a while, but the specific, yeah, virtues that you could the categorize. You could call it Aristotelian. But the main thing is like we take so there's a layer of leveraging Catholic Church teaching, etc. But then also like on the behavioral science side, like what makes good habits and good goals, right? So it
Yeah.
has to be like specific, actionable, measurable, like all this kind of all the criteria that makes a good habit. And so about combining the principles of habit making and then like what is good from the church.
What are the principles of habit making?
Yeah, like I was trying to remember the acronym of SMART, right? SMART. Yeah, like so there's like specific, time bound, actionable, measurable. I forget what the R was. Is it recurring? I don't know, but yeah, I know for a holy habits guy, you'd think I should have that memorized, but don't worry, it's in the algorithm. I just
That's pretty good.
yeah,
Yeah, I've always thought the key ingredient to changing any habit is pain. If you think about habits are by nature easy, they're pleasurable, whether those are
yep,
good habits or bad habits.
yeah.
So if you have a virtue that's in the mean, it feels really good. Like it feels great for Steph Curry to drain threes. He's got
Oh
the virtue.
man,
He's got the virtue of three draining, right?
yeah, yeah.
If I tried to learn that virtue, it would be really hard. And for Steph to try to learn that virtue as a 6-year-old kid or whatever, it was probably really hard for him too,
Yeah,
until it got easy. And the
that's right.
same thing with vice. Once you have the habit of doing wicked things or doing imprudent things,
Yeah.
it's really, really easy and it feels good to do
Yes.
bad. I don't know if you remember that old meme. You're probably too young for it, but there was that little kid who stole his grandma's car, Latarian Mills. You can Google it. It's hilarious YouTube video. But the news reporter's like, "Why did you do this?" He steals his grandma's car and like drives through a parking lot and crashes into the bunch of other cars.
Oh man.
And she's
Yeah.
like, "Why did you do this?" And he's like, "I did it because it's fun. It's fun to do bad things." And it shouldn't be, right? It shouldn't be fun to do bad things, but that's what vice is. You become, right? But most of
Yeah.
us, I shouldn't say us. I don't know who us is, but most people
Yeah.
fall into this middle ground between the mean and one extreme, either on the
Mm,
excess or deficiency. And
mm,
that's the land of restraint, or at least pain when you do something bad, right? Very
yeah.
few of us do something wicked and be like, yeah, I want some more of that, right? It's
Awesome.
like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
shoot, I shouldn't have done that, right?
Yeah. Right.
Or very few of us just wake up on Friday morning in Lent and say, I can't wait to fast all day today, baby. This is going to be awesome, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I have to do something that's going to be hard, but I'm going to do it because it's
Yeah.
going to help cultivate this beautiful habit of penance, right? Now,
Yeah.
maybe you do that enough and it becomes pleasant,
A hundred
but the,
percent. Yeah.
the only
Yeah.
way to move from virtue to vice, or vice versa for that matter, pun intended, is pain, right? You can't,
Yeah.
your first cigarette you ever smoked, you ever smoked a cigarette?
No, only when I was like 9 or 10, someone said, "Oh, taste this." I was like, "Ugh."
Okay, exactly.
Yeah.
So you smoked your first cig,
Something like that. Yeah.
burned a heater at age 9, and super painful, right? You gag, you puke.
Yeah.
But for some reason, some people will smoke again and again and again. Each time it gets a little bit less painful. And then one day you wake up and you have the habit of smoking cigarettes,
That's right. Yeah.
and it's painful not to smoke cigarettes
Yeah.
anymore, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to repeat the pain process to get back to the habit that's moderated,
Yeah.
right? And I think that the market is ripe for what you're doing because there's this modern current of secular asceticism, right?
Mm,
People want
mm.
to do hard things all of a sudden.
Yeah. Right.
Ice baths are in, saunas are in,
Did,
weightlifting's
did you see
in.
the morning routine video?
Oh, that is so funny. And all the meme copies of the morning routine, right? You like wake
Yeah.
up and dunk your face in ice water. Cool.
Yeah.
But that's it. It's like the world is so thirsty for difficulty.
Yeah.
It's just so ripe for the picking. It's like,
It's super
hey
difficult.
guys, here's your answer, right? It's not
Yeah.
just difficulty for difficulty's sake, or even
Yeah.
difficulty for a transitive good of like a rockin' body or something like that.
Yeah.
Great to have a rockin' body, like awesome. But it's better
Yeah.
to have a rockin' soul. You know what I mean?
Rock and
And
soul. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I think like our generation, especially in younger generations, they're like super thirsty for pain. And
Yeah.
hey, my God's naked, dangling from a cross, bloody right now. He's like king of pain.
Yes.
Great song, by the way. But yeah, um,
Wait, what song's the King of Pain? Which one's
it's
that?
a Sting song.
It's a Sting song. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you'd listen to it. You would know it. You know the
Yeah.
hook. It's good.
Yeah.
But anyway, I I think what you're doing is very, very good and needed. How's the downloads going? You guys getting some good traffic?
Yeah, yeah, we launched paid this year, and we have a well, I don't know how much I should say, but we I will say our conversion rate, which is crazy, free to paid. Um,
That's a double entendre when you use that phrase, right? Your conversion rate.
oh, it is, isn't it? Yeah, we're in the business of saving souls, man. So, um, no, it's like it's exciting. I don't know. I'm like I just want to tell you because it's like something awesome, but I'm like, would I like bite myself for being so? It's like it's like it's much higher than it's I don't I want to say it's like world class or anything, but it's like it's really strong. So product market fit's huge. Where people are like, oh my gosh. I mean, you can look at some of the reviews in the app stores and other things.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And if
so
yeah,
I'm
don't say a
excited.
number because this thing won't even air for like a month, so it'll probably be doubled by then.
Hope, yeah, yeah, God willing. So, yeah, no, really, really been excited about it. One thing, yeah, but before that thread, I do want to mention, right, this easy, right? So Dan Burke actually said this. Maybe you heard it. If our journey, when we walk the narrow way, imagine that there's like a cliff and like a little ledge, and then you're walking by the cliff. And then imagine you have a weight on your ankle that's hanging off the cliff, and the weight wants to pull you off the cliff, but you're kind of leaning, and maybe it's a little difficult or whatever, and you're walking. That weight is like the venial sins, the imperfections, the stuff I'm trying to overcome. If I can overcome that, the weight gets lighter, and I can just start running, and then bam, it's just fast track, free flight, like a man, I'm feeling good. That's what we want to get to. But of course, if I'm mortal sin, it's like the weight gets heavy and pulls me off the cliff, and then I, confess, and then I'm back on the track and fine, and then we keep going. But yeah, that it does
That's a
get
great analogy. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. That stuck with me when he said that. Yep.
And this, I mean, it's the app, but it's not just the app. It's like a way of thinking about your life seriously, right? Like,
Yeah.
what does it look like to be a beautiful person?
Mm,
I don't want to say, let's forget about heaven for a second. Never do that,
sure.
right? Keep your eye on the prize.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful to have beautiful habits, right?
Yeah.
How do you,
Yeah.
what is the measure of prudence even? It's like, how do you know when you're perfectly prudent or the perfectly prudent person? It's when you're doing beautiful things, right?
Yeah.
Beauty is sort of the measure of virtue, right?
Mm, mm.
Plato asked this. Interestingly, I don't know if you've read The Republic, but he actually makes an example of what does it mean to be a perfectly just man. And then at the end of it, Socrates says, man, I'm going to butcher this, but he says something like, and what if he were crucified and everybody thought he was a villain? Um,
Wow.
it, I'll give you a chess. You're a chess guy. I'll give you a chess example.
Yeah.
You have to choose between being the chess champion
Yeah.
and the best chess player in the world, but nobody knows you're the best chess player in the world. You have what's the highest rating?
Who's like, yeah, what's the highest rating right now? I mean, whatever.
What's Magnus Carlsen's rating right now?
I feel like the super gym's like 2,800, 2,900 something. I don't know. Yeah, don't
That's
quote.
amazing. Okay. So let's say you're the 3,000 chess rated player, but you're the only one in the world who knows it.
Hmm.
Or you're a chess cheater or something, and everybody thinks you have a 3,000 rating. Who's that girl who got caught cheating in chess with the little electronic buzzer in her pocket? I can't remember who it was.
Well, there was like a guy with some other type of buzzer apparently that
Oh,
was
that's right. Maybe it was, yeah, maybe it was, yeah. Anyway, so
yeah.
it's like choose your adventure, right? You could be praised
Hmm.
for being the world's greatest chess player, but no, you're not.
Yeah.
Or you could know you are and nobody else knows that you are. What would you choose? And it's easy to say, oh, I'd be the secret great chess player, but would you? You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm. Right.
yeah. That's the Platonic triad of the soul, right? You have lovers of pleasure at the
Hmm.
bottom, and then lovers of honor, and then lovers of wisdom. I think Michael Foley had a great essay on the three kinds of tobacco. So you have like the cigarette smokers, who is the erotic, right? The
Yeah.
lover of pleasure. They just like give me that nicotine hit, smoke
Yeah.
in the rain. It's ugly, it stinks.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if anybody's watching. I just need the pleasure, I need the feeling.
Yeah.
But then you have the cigar smoker, who's the
Yeah.
thumatic. He's like, look at me and my big cigar. It's a
Yeah.
social thing. It's a more beautiful thing than the erotic thing. So you're forsaking that hit of pleasurable nicotine habitually.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you have the pipe smoker, which
Mm.
constitutes the fewest amount of smokers, but it's the most noble by far. It's the sweetest aroma. It smells the best, but you can do it alone and enjoy it.
Mm. Interesting.
You can smoke a cigar alone too, or a cigarette alone,
That's
sure.
just kind of weird. Yeah, it's just less. Yeah. Right.
But it's also the most difficult. You have to learn the habit of pipe smoking. You have to know how to pack your pipe and tamp it and select the perfectly moist tobacco and the nice artifact to smoke it in.
Yeah.
But that's the narrow way, right? Is doing the
Mhm.
beautiful thing that's not necessarily tied to pleasure and not necessarily tied to honor. But ultimately, like you said, right, all that's hidden will be revealed, and your soul is invisible. until it isn't, right? So
Mm,
we got to learn the most beautiful, narrow way,
yeah.
painful as it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we didn't get a chance to talk about eschatology, but I'm personally convicted that there's a great urgency for us to kind of get it into gear sooner rather than later. So, yeah,
Sooner, please.
yeah.
Yeah, the time is short. I was just at St. Paul. Did you stop by St. Paul outside the walls when you were in Rome by chance?
I had, and I'm grateful I was able to come out, and my wife was a champ with our son. But yeah, I just was there for two days, man. I was in and out.
Oh, brutal. Yeah. Well, anyway, they have, if you've ever been there, they have all the popes along the wall in this gigantic basilica, right?
Yeah.
And the wall just ends where we are right now. Like there's no more space for
There's
another
no more
pope.
space.
Yeah, there might be one, I'm not sure, but
Oh
it's
wow.
like I guess they'll figure something out. Who knows? Who knows? We don't know the day or the hour, but
Yeah.
the transhumanism thing, which I actually wanted to talk to you about a lot. Maybe we'll have to have you back on if you got to jump, but
I don't have to. I'm just deferring to you. I could keep going. Yeah, it's as long as you
no,
want.
well, let's keep going then. We can cut it into two if Larissa wants to, but
Sure.
it is scary. I'll kind of ask you the question I've asked a few guests on this show,
Sure.
but I find myself at Whole Foods and I can pay for an apple with my hand.
Yeah.
Of course, I tend to ask what can I get for two middle fingers, but it's very scary. It's very, very scary when the body is becoming transactionalized and reduced to transitive value. So usually when your credit card's declined, they say, "Sorry, sir, your card's declined."
Yes.
But if your hand's declined, do they say, "I'm sorry, sir, you've been declined?" Right?
Mm,
So, and of course, like I'm not saying that you're going to hell if you ever bought an apple with your hand at Whole Foods, but the bodily union between tech and you, the person, is coming at us pretty fast. At the
yeah.
same time, Ray Kurzweil, famous futurist, is swearing, and he's been right about a lot. So maybe we should listen when he talks. But the guy swears that before he dies, he's going to be able to upload his brain into a computer and live forever. So there is this promise by the technocrats that we can save ourselves through our creatures, right? So there's
Yeah.
it's a crossroads. You have to choose. Do we unite in the flesh to be saved by our creatures? Do we unite in the flesh to be saved by our creator? And I feel
Mm,
like there's not enough Catholics asking this question, so I keep asking it. Like, how do we confront this?
yeah. Well, it's probably yeah.
That's the singularity claim, right? That's what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Confront. Yeah, I think it's my view is that it's almost like an inevitability, so we just try to save souls. But I think the man. Okay, so I think the spiritual warfare. I mean, even reading from like I forget the Exorcist book, but the idea is
Amorth,
like, sorry.
Gabriel Amorth,
Was it Gabriel Morth or was it
maybe.
kind of Vincent, the interview with an exorcist, and then of course Father Ripperger has his like Dominion book.
Yeah.
But there's the misconception that demons are just always just harassing human beings, trying to tempt them, and of course that happens, and that's a big thing. But there's some demons super intelligent where they just like sit and they think, and it's almost like the way I consider it, and maybe that they said I don't know if this is me or if this is what I read, but. Just like Lucifer, when he rebelled against God, he effectively kicked off a philosophical battle of this proposition of God's will be done, worship God. I'm going to refute that my will be done. And that's what the spiritual battle has been is trying to prove and assert that my will be done is a valid claim. And we see that echoing through the collective humanity, and we see it philosophically with all the, spiraling and everything that's happened. Um, and so, of course, it's a Luciferian manifestation of that, and such that reality is increasingly collapsing into those two distinct paths of I'm going to choose a life of God's will be done or my will be done. And so, part of that, of course, is this simulation-esque like where, okay, cool, like I can put on my sensory suits, my glasses, I have AI friends, companions, and I can be God because I'll be in this hyper fidelity reality where I can speak things into existence. I don't need to have relationship with actual human beings because I'll have my companions in the virtual thing, or I'll have my silicon robot companions, like whatever it is. So everyone can become their own god. So that's kind of everything is really centered around that. Yeah, I'll live forever, upload consciousness, all that. So you have this trend. You have well, let me add another thought there. So we don't know the day or the hour, but God says, I want all to be saved. So I have a speculation where what if God is going to keep the game going until no one else can be saved, subject to the constraints of free will? And it's like, well, what would that even happen? How, can't everyone, there's always one person who could convert, right? Well, I
There's
don't
something
know.
like that in Revelation, doesn't he? Doesn't he say that the days would not have been shortened? And I'm butchering it, for the sake of the souls that will be saved. But basically, if the days kept going, nobody could be saved, right? So he says he shortens the days for the sake of those remaining.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So fair enough, right? That's another piece of evidence. So, what would that mean? Well, number one, if I'm living in artificial reality with all the stuff, and then let's say God has a obstructed access, can God reach you in the simulation? I mean, sure, God can like do a miracle, but by ordinary, typical means, or by disconnecting myself from contemplation of God to an extremity. If I have brain chips in my head, if there's going to be an arms race of like your neighbor's getting the brain chip and now he can compute and think 3 times as fast, he can have 5 conversations at once. It's going to create that whole thing. So if you get brain chipped, can the brain chip interfere with your processing of contemplating God?
Yes,
Right. Yeah, yeah, right, right.
of
So
course. It has
yeah,
to necessarily. And this
has
is
to.
this is the problem, right? I was listening to Sam Altman and his merry gang of Silicon Valley engineers talk about how AGI is almost here because, NVIDIA is releasing a new chip or something.
Yeah.
And watching these engineers talk about epistemology, it's like watching the world's greatest lawyers trying to do open heart surgery. It and I'm like, oh, no, it's not happening. Like the world is safe from AGI because you guys aren't even asking the right epistemological questions.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah,
like you Drago could like jump in and tell them how to do it better than they're doing it. But um, back to wonder,
yeah,
admiratio is precisely impossible apart from the intellectus, right? That's the faculty of wonder. There has to be
yeah,
a receptive intuition of the whole to have wonder. And that's impossible in binary. It's
yeah,
impossible. What's not
yeah,
impossible is feigned ratiocinization. Like you can make a computer that abstracts like concepts. You
yeah,
can walk into any room and know the difference between the beer bottles and the lampshades because you have a formal concept in your brain pre-existing. You have an abstraction of those things. And a computer can do the same thing. Like this looks like more like a beer bottle, this looks like more like a lampshade. But what a computer can't do is relate that to the whole. It can only
Mm.
relate the parts to the parts.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, right. Like you said, yeah, connecting
There's
the
so,
two
so
others.
but
Yeah, yeah,
heaven
yeah, yeah.
happens in the intellectus, right? The passive intellect.
With the universals, yeah,
That's right. That's
yeah,
right. So theoria, which Aristotle's final virtue in the Ethics, but also in John's Gospel, the word he uses from when Mary Magdalene sees him resurrected, it's theoria. That is, she has this intuitive sight of the man.
mm,
That's impossible in binary. It's impossible for a computer to theorize, and it always will be. So
yeah.
the best we're going to get is a counterfeit. But the problem is you won't be able to spot the difference.
That's right. Yeah, which ends up being like a substance accidents thing where advanced AI is going to have the accidents of human consciousness, but not the substance. But you'll have enough people fooled thinking that it has some real substance of consciousness. And then, of course, AI will have rights, I guarantee you, right? People will be protesting, no, it has rights, and you'll have all that from like the secular space. You'll have some worship of it, no doubt. Um, well, so you have that all eschatological thread. You also have, I don't know if you looked into the whole rebuilding of the third temple, the red heifers. It would sound like a conspiracy, but actually it's not. It's very mainstream, and it actually is what influences even the October 7th Hamas attacks, and in the Islamic world and the Jewish world. So that's a whole nother thread too with the rebuilding of the third temple, which could happen conceivably within the next 5 years, which would be a big deal.
It would be a huge deal. Have you read the prodigal? Yeah, I'm sure you have the prodigal son in Luke's gospel.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
The
Right.
son, the son, the son says to the father, "Give me a share in your whole kingdom, right? In your whole livelihood. Give me my inheritance now."
Yeah.
And if you read the Greek, which I don't really know Greek, but I know a few words. But if you read the Greek, it's interesting because the son says, "Give me a share of your ousios," which means the substance. Back to your
Mm-hmm.
substance and accidents thing. And the father says, "Okay, here is here is my bion." And the bion is not the ousios. The bion is like like bios biology. It's like the visible signs of life.
Mm-hmm.
So the son thinks he's got it. The son thinks he's got the substance of the father, but he's
Mm.
he's kind of just hood rich. And so he goes out and he
Interesting.
spit and but he goes out with the bion. He doesn't get the
Yeah.
ousios, right? But he
Yeah.
spins lavishly as if he's got it, but he doesn't have the source. He doesn't have the way to make the farm grow. He just has the produce. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He goes out and he spends it and he finds that he loses his ousios in doing that.
Mm.
And he goes back to the father and ultimately is showered with the ousios, like that he
Yeah.
always had it as his birthright. And if you read the prodigal son in the with the lexicon and just see where Luke uses ousios versus bion, it's profound, it's mind bending. But the point is, the ousios can be faked. It's like you cut a branch off a tree or you fall into mortal sin, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you don't turn into, a decrepit looking zombie. You can't really tell on the outside.
Yeah.
But that thing's going to wither eventually and it's going to die eventually because you're disconnected from your source of life.
Yeah.
And so what we've been able to do artificially, like that literally through artifacts, is imitate the ousios, but it can't sustain.
No.
And John tells us this in Revelation that if you ever read Revelation and you notice there's a beast and there's a lamb, okay,
Yeah.
and they look almost identical. He's talking about seven horns, seven diadems, a mortal wound from which they both recovered. They both demand worship. They both have a great number of followers.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to just see the Antichrist coming, like as this
Yeah.
mustache twitching villain, lurking in the shadows. It's going to look just like the lamb, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you look at Signorelli's painting of the Antichrist, where it's like this perverse looking Jesus being animated, you've probably seen it, but up on a pedestal. It's very, very, very hard for most, if not all people, to spot the difference between the beast and the lamb, which is why none of the apostles could spot Judas for what he was doing. They were like praising him. They're like, "Oh yeah, we should sell this nard and give it to the poor." But it took John's eyes to see Judas for what it was. And so
Yeah.
I feel like the church right now, as it confronts, first of all, what I noticed in that conference, and I said this, right? I probably didn't make any friends at
Yeah.
this conference, but we were just afraid. We were afraid to talk about the eschatology at work here. Like
Yeah. We
we
have to,
we
right?
didn't. Why is that? We didn't want to sound too Protestant or something. We don't want to sound too crazy. We wanted to play the game. We want to be like, yeah, we're technologists too. Include us in your club, Microsoft, right? Not look, great people from Microsoft, yeah, friends there, whatever. But
Sure. Yeah.
we were afraid to talk about the heart of the matter, which is actually eschatological. I mean, why is that? That's a question for you. Why were we afraid to do that? Why are we afraid to do that as a church?
Um, well, I guess afraid, or is it there's so many moving pieces so people don't know where to start? And like, is that the first question you tackle, or do you try to tackle some of the other ones that it's going to be less divergence of opinion, less interpretation? So I don't know, like even just to take a step back, is it necessarily fear driven or just like there's only so much space and time? But to your point, on the flip side, it is important enough that it could have, it should have had, more distinct emphasis. So no, I mean, yeah, fair enough. And I suppose maybe it is element of shrugging of, well, we don't know the day or the hour. So I guess that's the interesting thing, right? Is like, do you prepare in a way that assumes a indefinite go forward where I'm going to plan as if humanity in the game is going to keep going for another 1,000, 5,000 years, and that's how I should operate? Or do I operate like the world's going to end tomorrow? And obviously, both of those things are wrong, but I do think, well, let me add another thing. I know we talked about AI, we talked about Middle East a little bit. Actually, there's a lot in the Middle East. That, I mean, I think that itself is noteworthy. But the also look the 2,000 year anniversary of Jesus Christ's resurrection, 2033 AD. Do you think that that's not going to be a tumultuous time on the spiritual level? The demons are
Wow.
going to be super active.
Yeah.
And no doubt about it. Now, what does that specifically mean concretely? Okay, well, the verdict's out, but for sure, I promise you it's going to be crazy. Um, and I even some fathers, I forget, I think there is a three ages of the church, right? Where it's like the time between Adam and Moses, the patriarchs, and then Moses to Christ, and then the end stage is Christ to like the second coming. And those you can conceptualize in 2,000 block increments, roughly speaking. Anyway, so to me, like a lot of, yeah, a lot of this comes down to um, just like a linear regression. It doesn't have to be a linear regression, but just like a scatter plot, and you see enough data, and then you see the relationship, you see the line. It's an exercise of pattern recognition. And I think the problem is that um, compared to a deductive syllogism where everybody can critique premise one, premise two, and kind of get on the same page, when you appeal to pattern recognition, there's a
You look
lot
like a
more room to,
conspiracy theorist.
well, right. Or like you trigger people's emotional biases and they're just not going to want to see the pattern. And you get into that other question, like I said earlier, the risk of hallucinating something that's not there or a risk of being blind. And unfortunately, that decision of type one versus type two error, false positive versus false negative, people's decision on which mistake they make ends up being an emotional one because I'd rather not be a fool. I'd rather not, it becomes very complicated and
Well, but
it's
but play it out. Play it out. You're making a mimetic argument here as far as the pattern recognition goes. But John's the only one who can see Judas at work. He's the only one who can see the beast versus the lamb. Even Peter, the prince of the apostles, is totally blind to Judas's work until the very end.
yeah.
But who ends up looking like a fool? It's not John. It's Peter. Because Peter gets his back up against the wall because he was too late to see it and has to pull a sword out in futility in the
In
last minute.
futility. Oh wow, yeah,
And that's where it's going, right?
yeah.
It starts with, hey, let's digitize your archives, Vatican, and and then it ends with the library being sacked. And we're like, but I thought we were friends, and it's like when John Daggett says to Bane in Nolan's Batman, but we were on the same team, and Bane goes, "You think this gives you power over me?" Um, man, it just hurts to see the way we are approaching this AI thing as a
It,
church.
it
Having
it's
seen it now, it's really scary.
it's tough though because even like with what we're doing, like there is unprecedented like good that can be milked. It's almost like the train might be headed off the cliff, but actually like you can squeeze some juice because if you accept that, hey, we're not the train's gonna go off the cliff no matter what, no changing it. I mean, look, end times is a thing, so we all agree like it's not like we're gonna ever avoid the end times. So then the question is like, can you still maximize the good stuff happening on the way since you're not going to turn it around?
No, no, that's making it transactional. You're making a utilitarian argument.
Well,
I mean, yeah,
but
sure. Like harvest the good, see the good, affirm the good in anything that happens. But at the end of the day, you have to have the vision and the perspicacity to see at the heart of what's really happening.
yeah, well, fair enough. I actually do want to unpack that, but I wanted to add a fourth item to the table to make the argument of eschatology as well for the timing. There was this prophecy, I forget, was it Pope Benedict or I don't know, 56 years ago? Like the church has to have a crucifixion just like Christ, right? So the church is going to undergo crucifixion. Um, Now, you know that there's a breaking point, and I apologize. Look, this is mainstream now. Like everyone understands the criminal activities, the global organizations, of course, with like trafficking, all this kind of stuff. of course, there's the Epstein, like that's indisputable, right? So there's already a, Sound of Freedom, right? All that. So I don't think it's controversial for me to say that that's like an arc. This, dark industry is being exposed. But here's the thing: what better thing for the great adversary is to flip that and pin that on the church, pin the worst possible evils onto the church, just like Christ was, rather than
Oh
being
yeah.
seen.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
So for sure. And then when you have the USAID things, you have some of these like front organizations. It could be worse than like the abuse scandal. And for sure, that's something that would make the world freak out against the Catholic Church. Otherwise, yeah, it's like, how is the Catholic Church going to be crucified if that's what's going to happen? I can't really think of another way at the moment, but it's not for me necessarily to figure out either. So
It's true. And as goes the head, so will go the body. That's definitely an option. There's kind of two ways it could play out.
yeah,
But there's a chapter in John's or a verse in John's gospel that gives me a lot of hope. I guess even temporal hope, if that's okay to have.
yeah,
It's when they see Jesus on the beach after he's resurrected, and they're all coming to him in the boat. And maybe I should pull it up, but I'll just try to do it by memory. But
yeah,
John sees, he's like, look, well, they don't, nobody sees first. There's a guy on the beach and they're on a boat. They went out fishing. Okay. They're doing their work. They're doing their work as apostles. And there's a guy on the boat that says, hey, what are you doing? We're fishing. He's like, you catch anything? And they're like, no, we've been trying all night. We haven't caught anything.
yeah,
And Peter's like probably frustrated at this point because it's super annoying to get asked, like, what are you using for bait when you're not catching anything? And he doesn't recognize it's the Lord.
yeah.
And then John says to Peter, it is the Lord. It's the Lord. Like a scene in the movie when you're like talking bad about somebody behind their back and they're right behind you. And Peter's like,
Mm,
oh, he's right behind me, isn't he? And John's
yeah.
like, yep. But then Peter gets it all of a sudden in an instant. And there's a curious verse in that chapter that says he gets dressed because he was lightly clad for work and
Okay.
he jumps in the ocean and swims to Christ.
Mm,
But
mm,
there's two things implicit there. One is that Peter has this sort of moment of realizing his dignity as the Prince of the Apostles and redons his papal regalia and runs to our Lord when he's out
mm,
doing this mundane stuff, trying to fit in, trying to fish. But two, which is kind of hidden in there, but it's evident if you read it carefully, the boat somehow still gets to the shore with everybody on it. And the boat gets there without Peter being its captain,
oh, okay. Interesting.
which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to assume like who pilots the boat. We know from another gospel that John was a co-worker of Peter's in the charter fishing world or whatever.
The charter. Yeah.
Somebody
Yeah.
pilots
Yeah.
that boat to the
Yeah.
shore.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what I always hope for is the moment when the apostolic authority and the institutional authority that's symbolized in St. John's Gospel by Peter always
Yeah.
has a wake-up call and stops playing on the world's terms, especially now at a moment when the world is so thirsty for that.
Yeah.
Like, we're so afraid to use Catholic language, especially the clergy. It's really disappointing. It was disappointing to me. And you have like Palantir calls their stuff ontology. You have Microsoft calling their salespeople evangelists. They
Right.
are using Catholic language
Yeah.
when we are afraid to. And I hope and I pray that Peter gets it together and realizes why God put him here. And it's not to play ball with Microsoft, you know? It's not. I'm happy to say that. I won't make any friends saying that. But man, wake up and realize that you are here to govern this world until Christ comes again. That's why he put you here. You're not here to subordinate the riches of the
Mm,
church to technocratic purposes.
yeah. Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
have to agree with me. I don't want you to lose friends too.
No, no, no. Well, I agree. I mean, I guess I always think the flip side, right? So I guess the flip side is when we took pagan, we converted the pagan things into Christian. So can we get into the secular and inject the spirit and reform them, or are they not salvageable, and whatever I suppose would have to be the decision point there. But what I wanted to say is that's interesting. This caring what the world thinks is almost like a extrapolation of the first sin of Adam, right? And if we, I don't mean to be overly, but I think most people would agree that in the current age, especially with the balancing the struggles of the times has been more of like, right, the weak men mentality, right, where like a loss of whatever, like the men not stepping into whatever type of role that is unique for men, and more succumbing for fear of, I don't say fear of the feminine, because of course the feminine, rightly understood, is a beautiful thing and all that. But I mean, just the excesses, the extremes. So it's almost like the original sin of Adam, where he really wanted Eve's approval, and that was kind of like his big, I mean,
Bingo.
yeah,
Bingo.
right.
And what's the one reason that God gives for the fall of man in Genesis? Any ideas? Take a guess. He gives one reason for why they fell.
Believing the serpents? No.
No, he says, Adam, because you have listened to the voice of your wife.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the whole, go back to your memetics, right? That
Yeah.
there's a first garden where Adam has a choice to eat something and so be damned, but he has to do that by listening to his flesh, which is pleasant, right? And he
Yeah.
doesn't want to disobey his flesh. It's really
Yeah.
easy to obey your flesh. But then you have the second garden in Gethsemane, where there's also a tree and there's also a fruit that you have
Mm,
to eat, but it's horrific. And the bride doesn't want to do it. The bride says, I have nothing to do
wow.
with this tree and this cross, and it'll be too much for one man to bear. But the second Adam makes the right choice in obeying his father over his flesh. But he does that precisely for the sake of his flesh's glory. He does it to
Mm,
save his bride. Adam
yeah.
forsook his bride in that moment by obeying her. And
Right.
that you're exactly right, Drago. That's it. And I do think if the stated goal, the stated telos of Microsoft at this very moment is to accelerate AGI, which there's no other way to say it, but that's the counterfeit human person, right? And if you have a counterfeit human person, you have a counterfeit reflection of God. That is the beast. Okay, let's be honest
No, it
about it.
has to, yeah, I mean, if that's not beast, I don't know what it
If
possibly could
that's
be.
not
What
beast,
what
I
could
don't know
outdo
what it
that?
is.
If that's
Okay, so
not final boss, I don't know what the final boss is going to be. Oh, and by the
bingo.
way, the other, this is super speculative, but the other thing is like, okay, the point number five is like, if there is some concept of a global governance, right? New world order, whatever people. But the only way that's achievable, right, is that there's it's like people don't, because who's going to be in charge, right? Every leader wants to be in charge. But if AI ends up becoming believable enough, we're like, hey, we can all agree to submit to this thing because it's objective, it's basically God, right? In a sense, then that also gives motive for more of a global governance approach. I mean, if that's even necessary, I'm not saying that's a necessary condition to have a global thing, but
Well, it has to be for everybody to play ball in that game. We all have to be commodifiable, tradable, digitized objects fit for use and ultimately deletion. But the
mm,
stated goal of Microsoft is to rapidize the transition to AGI, if that's possible, and it's not. So it has to be counterfeit intelligence,
yeah,
counterfeit person, counterfeit God. The stated goal of the Catholic Church, last I checked, was to bring all men to the truth.
yeah,
Those are diametrically opposed goals. And why you would partner on this front, maybe the church is smarter than me. Maybe, probably, definitely. Maybe the princes are smarter than me. I'm sure they are. So hopefully I pray, and I honestly do pray that they know something I don't. But to partner with such an organization to digitize your holistic corpus of accumulated knowledge over the centuries, to assist in their diabolical ends, makes my skin crawl.
ultimately, if we just concretize the risk, so if you give the secular AI titans access to the treasures of the church, let's say. And in this case, the words, the symbols on the page, right, the intellectual things, is the risk that because ultimately, what's the output of AI? It's words. And so it's just the deception will be greater, whereas if they didn't have access to the church, it would be a lower deception that the human being could still differentiate. But now secular AI with the church can construct a beast that will achieve a greater level of deception than otherwise would have been possible. I mean, is that
Exactly right.
okay?
That's exactly right. Luke 11:21. When a strong man fully armed guards his own place, the goods are safe. But when one stronger than he attacks him and overcomes him, he takes away his armor in which he trusted and divides his spoil. We're trying to play this stupid game by partnering with the technocrats to give them digitized treasures of the church so that our own weapons can be used against us. Back to the Nolan reference, it's when Bane breaks into the Bruce Wayne's armory and says, "Your precious armory," right? Only to use them against him and his people.
Okay, but then as far as like, okay, if it's like, here's a gatekeeper who offers consent, have access to my goods, versus the gatekeeper says you don't have access, but there's so much in public domain anyway, like meaning
Why
like
do you think Microsoft wants that access?
well,
Why do you
what
think they're even
specifically
willing
are
to
they?
partner?
But what do they access? I'm just because I don't know. This is my ignorance here, but it's like you have the catechism, you have the encyclicals, you have writings of the saints, you have like that stuff anyone can get access to. So what's the secret sauce that we're
I'm
giving to
not
them?
making a claim that there's some like Gnostic treasure trove of secret stuff hidden in the Vatican. And I think everybody should have access to everything in the Vatican, and they will, right? There is a way to do that. What I'm saying is digitize it on your own freaking terms, right? But we're not we're like,
I
oh, we
see,
don't, we can't afford to buy the GPUs to do this
I
thing
see what you're saying.
ourselves.
I
Like,
see what
but
you're saying.
Microsoft already has them, and they're so nice. They're just gonna let us train their own models on them.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Got it. Okay. And then I guess, and right, maybe that's the consequence of the suffering is that let's just say, is that the decision where if I don't use their GPUs, the stuff's just never going to be deployed. And so, right, then it becomes maybe a utilitarian calculation of pros versus cons, and that can become risky.
Yeah, well, look who wants to control Wikipedia. I mean, it's about controlling the medium. That's it. It's about controlling the medium. And if,
It's, I will
any,
say what's really crazy now, because even I'm involved in apologetics, obviously, you've seen that. And one of the strange things happening, which you knew, I mean, I could have told you from the very beginning this was going to happen. Now you're starting to see it, is people won't even, like some people who get their hands on AI, they won't even like acknowledge or wrestle with the concept you're saying. They'll throw it in an AI with a biased prompt and then be like, see, AI refutes you. And like, yeah, it's this fear of outsourcing your thinking, but that's literally what's starting to happen. And people think,
bingo,
yeah, yeah.
that's right.
But on the flip side, I'm like, let's just say right now, if AI is Protestant, I would prefer that AI has more of the Catholic stuff. So if AI is going to bias someone to be Catholic, but then to your point, if you have a bad actor who can put parameters and suppress the Catholic view, then that's going to be bad, obviously, right? So
It's not even, yeah, it's not about suppressing the Catholic view as much as using it against itself.
using it against itself,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
AI is not here to bring us to heaven, man. It's not here
Right.
to save us. It's here to save us in a way that they think salvation will come, which is singularity
Yeah.
ultimately, and AGI, which is training, trying to artifice your God. But that's a tale as old as time. It's idolatry, right? You melt the calf, you worship it. We
Yeah.
made stuff, and because we are the masters of the stuff we made, we can be the gods behind the God.
Yeah.
But it's a distraction from the God man. All right.
Yeah. Well, amen to that. We got only Jesus can save, and we can be his instruments to save others. Can we use AI to save others? No, I mean only with a human who's yeah. It's
No, you
no.
can't. Anything can be an instrument for good. I was using AI to look up Luke's gospel when I read
That's
it to
right.
you.
That's
Right?
right.
It's
Yeah.
like great. It's a tool. It's a tool. It's a tool. Tools can be used for good or for evil purposes.
Yeah.
But this is a tool with a very particular telos,
Yeah.
stated by its creators to eliminate the line between creature and creator, to eliminate the line between the person and the artifact. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I'm not saying sound an alarm and go full Amish. Like, definitely don't do that. But definitely, to quote Pope Leo the Great, recognize your dignity, O Christian. Stop subordinating your treasures to technocratic ends.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it. We'll
In a
have you
minute.
on. We'll
Yeah.
have you on again. And thanks for your great work in the vineyard and for education. I think your life is a testimony to the power of a great liberal arts exposure. Where people can find more of it, magnusinstitute.org. Get all the plugs out of the way here. Where can people find you on Substack, X,
Yeah,
LinkedIn?
X, follow me on X, Drago Dimitrov is my account. And then you have the Holy Habits app in the App Store. And yeah, I do have a Substack, but you can see the link on the X. The X is the best place to find me. So
Awesome. We'll link to everything in the show. Drago Dimitrov, hopefully this isn't the last time you come on. This was an awesome conversation. Thank you for being here. I hope you had fun.
I did. Thank you for having me, John. Pleasure.
Awesome. Magnusinstitute.org for more. See you next time.